Hi. Um, so this is a just whining stream. Um, I'm homesick and I was bored and frankly I can't concentrate enough to listen to any videos or anything and I could just sleep, but I decided to see if anybody wants to just come on and chat about stuff not too serious. So Bart says, my toddler has been whining all day. I am also stuck inside. Whining is good. I support your efforts. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Actually, I was kind of thinking about that during the countdown. So, Jonathan Haidt, and so much for me not talking about anything serious. Hopefully, I don't say anything stupid. But Laura says, I don't want to come on. I just want to hear you whine. Garth says, I'm going to start whining about this title. So Jonathan Haidt talks about how on the internet we just see people at their best. You know, like if you actually knew me in real life, like if I got sick, you would see that. Well, hopefully, I mean, if you're as involved in my life. Richard!
Hello, Jacob.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. How are you? How are you feeling? You sick?
I mean, I just have a cold, sore throat.
Yep. No thing.
It's nothing serious. So New Year's Eve, I woke up. I had bought tickets to like a New Year's Eve show that a friend of mine was going to, and because so for the past 25 years since high school, a bunch of my friends from high school, we had, and you met one of them, Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
So every year we've had a New Year's party for the past 25 years.
Oh wow. Nice.
Yeah. So and that's basically every year New Year's. That's what I do.
Okay.
But this year, so the past few years, it's been because of COVID. It's been online. And this year, I was like, okay, I'm not doing the COVID thing. I'm not going to do the online thing. I bought tickets to go to this thing. Um, I should have given you my ticket. Maybe you could have gone. Are you?
I'm at home. Yeah, I'm at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a waste of $45, but
Yeah.
this is a whining stream. I'm gonna whine a lot. So New Year's Eve, I woke up and I went and I had kind of like a tickle in my throat. You know what that's like?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, am I getting sick? Am I gonna can I go to the New Year's Eve thing?
Mm-hmm.
Am I gonna be spreading germs and stuff? And so all day I was like, am I getting sick? Is it getting worse? Am I getting sick? Is it getting worse? And it started getting worse So like around 6 p.m., I wrote to my friend, "Yeah, I'm not going to be coming."
Oh.
And I decided to go to like the online New Year's Eve thing.
Mhm.
And then last night, I woke up at 2 a.m. and every time I swallow,
Yeah.
it hurts. And it's like, yay. And so I had to go to the pharmacy and buy cough drops and stuff like that
Yep.
so I could sleep.
Yep.
And then, yeah, so now I'm here whining.
About sickness.
Yeah.
Sickness. Yeah, I haven't gotten sick since college yet. I have quite a few friends who have, but just haven't had anything yet.
So have I told you about the two scariest diseases?
No.
The scariest disease I'm glad I can't get, which is fatal insomnia,
Okay.
and it's hereditary, and it's horrible. Like around the age of 35, it it starts setting in, and eventually you can't sleep at all, and it takes about 6 months for your brain to turn into mush, and then you die in another 6 months. So, like a year of not sleeping and losing your mind. So that's like the scariest disease I have ever heard of. The second scariest disease is meningitis. And college students get meningitis a lot, which is why I recommend getting vaccinated for meningitis. Um, because, like, there's this YouTuber, she's a cosmetics YouTuber, and she was only like 18 years old, and she was athletic, everything, right?
Yeah.
She got meningitis. Um, week later, she was a quadruple amputee. And that's the thing with meningitis is, well, first of all, it's really quick. Second, the symptoms are you become really, really disagreeable, and you want to be alone, and you like go away from people, and if you, which is one of the worst things that can happen, because if there's somebody to like be like, hey, you need to go to the doctor, or even take you to the doctor,
Right.
you're and sometimes like this is actually, so when I took my ethics in death and dying class way back when I was your age, one of the questions was, can you force somebody with meningitis to take antibiotics? Because if they don't, they'll die. But at the same time, the meningitis is causing them to want to refuse treatment and not being like, where does patient rights come in?
Right.
Right? What was I saying?
How you were talking about the college woman before that?
Oh, so yeah, I mean college. Yeah, when you go to college, you should get vaccinated for meningitis, because
Yeah.
it's very common, and it's the most common reason for people your age who are absolutely healthy, because they get an infection, to have extremities lopped off.
Right. So it's by just you get a cut and you're infected with it or something.
It's usually not as it's not a cut. In fact, so you can get viral meningitis, bacterial meningitis, or fungal meningitis.
Okay.
And all it is as opposed to any other part of your body being infected.
Mm-hmm.
It's an infectation of your nervous system.
Hmm.
So like your like your spine and your brain and stuff.
Right.
And so that's why people end up having to have extremities amputated. And that's why one of the things is being very irritable, like having headaches and just like, and sometimes people with meningitis will just like go to bed thinking, oh, I have a cold or something,
Mm-hmm.
and then bad things happen. Yeah, only so bacterial meningitis, like just antibiotics will fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Viral meningitis, I don't think we really have too
Right.
much for that
Yeah.
other than the vaccines. And then
Right.
there's fungal meningitis as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yeah.
reason I know so much about meningitis is because it scares the hell out of me.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know if I have my vaccine. But I remember it coming up, I think, my senior year. And then my mom, I don't know if it's because of the whole COVID thing, just. She says she's always been skeptical of vaccines. Maybe she has, and I just never noticed because I wasn't paying attention. But I feel like it got way worse, her anxiety with COVID. And I don't even know if she got the vaccine.
You blanked out. So while while Richard is missing in action, well, so the thing about, well, first of all, it's really interesting. People don't have very good memories. Hey, there you are.
Yeah. I keep getting calls from my parents. My dad's are getting food. So,
Your
yeah.
parents love you.
Yes, they do. They love me a lot.
So, you were talking about your mom and vaccine hesitant.
Yeah. And then there was some confusion about, like, meningitis versus, I think it's called meningococcal disease. And,
Mm.
my primary care doctor, like, we didn't really understand what she was saying about the difference, and my mom was just confused, and I wasn't like really listening. So I don't know whether I have that, but the meningitis vaccine or not.
A
Hopefully,
lot
I
of
do.
colleges, a lot of colleges require
But
I remember when I started at college, in order to be in the dormitories, you had to show proof of meningitis vaccination.
that makes sense. So I probably do have it. Probably do. That's good.
So when does your semester start?
It says on the 9th.
Mine too.
Nice. What classes are you taking?
Um, it's just the first introductory course
Okay,
in Masters of Social Work.
got it. Is this your first semester?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
not even, so they're on quarters. So
Okay.
I'm actually just taking one course in the middle of the quarter. I don't know how they work it exactly. It's an online thing, but so they're starting me in part two of the quarter,
Okay.
and so I can only take 3 units anyway. So I'm going to be taking 3 units, and then next quarter, I'm I'm going to take 15 units, which is a crazily large amounts of units
Yep.
apparently.
Yep.
Usually, well, I mean, it's not crazy. It's the max they'll let me take.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think like 12 units is considered full time. And then I'll have 18 units, and then I can apply to, um, if I get good grades, I can apply to transfer to this other place that I wanted to go. But because when I dropped out of USC law school, like I got a fail, and I in one of my courses, and USC law school's GPA, like the year after I left, they changed the GPA, just like brought it up by point two,
Mm-hmm.
right? The GPA, because they actually had a lower GPA than most other places, right?
Okay.
And so when I applied to LSU, they have so you don't have to have any graduate courses at all. And my undergraduate GPA was just fine, but my graduate GPA was 2.9, and they have a minimum of 3.0 in order to get in.
Mm.
I was like, but this is USC law school. Like, how are you comparing this to like all the people like, and, and they're like, sorry, but here you can take, if you take 9 credits and you get a 3.4 on them, your GPA will be high enough, and we'll be able to take you.
Right. Okay.
So I'm taking, but this place I'm going has credit units. I mean, has what am I thinking? Not semesters, quarter units.
Right. Okay.
So it's going to be divided by 3 and multiplied by 2. So I'm taking 18 units total, and then
Mm-hmm.
divided by 3 multiplied by 2 is 12.
12. Yeah.
And so if I get a high enough GPA in those 12 units, I should be able to get my total graduate GPA up, and then I can transfer to LSU.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have questions about my GPA too. I'm in a somewhat sticky situation. I sort of like I didn't finish a couple books for the the books program I'm in, and that ended up impacting my grade way more than I thought it would. Um, uh, and I have to go. I will probably be back on later, but we will be driving now, so I will maybe continue my whining about my GPA later. Goodbye.
You continue to whine, but apparently I've gotten my dog sick as well.
Okay.
I
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I also have to leave. So should I end the stream? I'm gonna leave you, Jacob. Goodbye.
So another thing to whine about. Apparently, Happy is sick too. Come, puppy. So what else can I whine about? Oh, and I somehow got myself into a Twitter spat with a bunch of anti-Semites. But what else is new? Um, I just got over an annoying cold. Lots of coughing, sneezing, runny nose, clearing throat. Luckily, no fever. Hope you feel better soon. Thank you. So, local distance apparently got into a fight with a bunch of anti-Semites on Twitter and stuff, and he replied to a message that was idiotic, and I noticed that a lot of people I follow the guy who was posting something that was clearly idiotic, at least clearly idiotic to me. And I retweeted saying, wow, why do so many people I follow, like, follow somebody who says such stupid things. And I wonder about you, um, if you follow him. I didn't unfollow everybody who follows him, but I went through, like, it was a good opportunity to unfollow people because I guess, whatever, people might not, he might not always say stupid things or whatever. So I didn't unfollow everybody who follows him, but like, it was Chad. How you doing?
Good. I have the day off, and so I was doing a little bit of cleaning, did some laundry.
I have to do laundry.
And hang on a second, I gotta plug in my phone.
Lance says, "Woo, I don't follow him, and I have no idea who this Andrew Tate guy is either." I call that a win.
What happened?
Oh, we were talking about something on Twitter, and then Lance said he has no idea who Andrew Tate is. He calls that a win.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently, you're good at whining.
I'm good at whining?
That's what Lance says.
Oh, of course I am. I have something like a PhD in whining. And I'm the kind of whiner that says, "Oh, I don't want to play." So then I take my ball and I go home, and then I'm like, "But I want to play," and then I'm back.
Well, so this was actually something I was thinking about as I was starting the stream. Was So Jonathan Haidt talks about how people are getting depressed, especially young women, because they look on social media, and on social media people they only take the pictures, they only put up the pictures of themselves when things look great, right? They only post the good things that happen, they don't post about the bad things that happen. So like, when you actually see people in real life, like you see them going through all this stuff, like they have good days and bad days and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on social media, you only see, like, I was thinking, do I want to stream or not? I'm like, well, I wanted to talk to people, but yeah, that was the main reason I decided to stream, but because it was like boring sitting here watching videos, and I can't even concentrate very well. So like I couldn't even watch the videos very well.
What are you sick with?
I think it's just a cold, but like I took some cold medication, and I've just not been feeling great. Lance does not whine. Hey Lance, how you doing?
Hi, Lance.
Hey guys.
Hey, Lance. Guess who else is coming in March?
Who?
Tim. The
A little retreat for some of us who have a special disease.
Oh, okay. I was wondering what was happening in March. I'm guessing I know now. I actually went to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. Yeah, and I bought the big book. I haven't finished reading it yet. It's still in my bathroom. Yeah. So did I tell you, Lance, I was taking substance abuse counseling courses?
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah. Well, now I decided to drop that program, and I'm I'm starting a master's degree on Monday, actually.
And what's that going to be in?
Master's of social work. So the reason I dropped the certificate, the substance abuse certificate, was I saw, even if I finish it, I'm still gonna have to go get a master's to actually like become a real therapist and stuff. So I'm like, okay, I'm wasting my time on this. And Max told me, like, before I started the substance abuse courses, he's like, don't waste your time with this. And I didn't listen, but I wanted to see what the courses were like, and I wanted to see what, like, get a feel for the environment and stuff. And frankly, I don't think I could have I could have really done master's degree work in, like, during my busy season. I took 9 units last semester in substance abuse, which is 3 classes. Got straight A's. Aren't you proud of me?
Why don't you just become a rabbi and serve people and counsel them as a rabbi, Jacob?
Because I hate conservative and reform and reconstructionist Judaism, and I can't be an Orthodox rabbi unless I am actually observant. And I was on my way. I was assistant rabbi at a synagogue. I was actually on my way to becoming an Orthodox rabbi, but you have to be married to be an Orthodox rabbi, pretty much. First of all, you have to be married. Second, my family was not very happy with my level of observance. Like, so when I was assistant rabbi at a synagogue, my parents didn't even come for high holiday services to my synagogue. And it's kind of like, you could at least come for high holidays, But they really didn't like the idea of me being a rabbi.
I'm the black sheep of my family. It sounds like you are too.
Kind of, yeah. But I was the black sheep because I was like way more religious than my parents wanted me to be.
That's kind of how I'm the black sheep of my family in another way, not the religious way, but maybe the sobriety way.
Yeah. I mean, so one of the professors I had, he was the only one who actually taught me anything last semester. He was 85 years old. He had been doing counseling for the last 45 years. This is an online class he's running, right? And he's teaching law and ethics of counseling, right? And I went to law school, Lance. Everything he was teaching was wrong. The textbook he was using is not published, and by reading it, I could figure out why it's not published, because nobody would publish something that's as dumb as what he was using as the textbook, right? And in addition to all that, it was really obvious that he's a brilliant therapist, but he has no effing clue why he knows how, like, it's like procedural versus propositional, right? So he's teaching a class, but he only has procedural knowledge, and he doesn't even have the propositional knowledge of his procedural knowledge to explain it. So what he would constantly do is role playing, and the role playing would have nothing to do with the class whatsoever. But like, somebody would be talking to him, and he's like, "Let's role play that situation." Like, somebody would ask a question, and he'd say, "Let's role play that," right? And then in the role playing, he would psychoanalyze you, and all the rest of us like could watch him psychoanalyze the person he's talking to. And like, I learned a lot by watching him do what he did. But then somebody in the class would be like, "Why'd you do X, Y, or Z?" And he would give a total bullshit answer, which was like, I'm like, "No, that's not why you did it. I mean, I see what you did, and you did it correctly, but you have no effing clue why you know how to do the things you do. So it was the most interesting class.
Yeah, it's interesting that you put that together because I always crave people that I'm an ENTP. So if I find that you have, if you really know what you're talking about, I will totally be open to listening and changing my mind. But that's, there's these concepts like you share your experience, strength, and hope. And so someone like a Jordan Peterson got down in the weeds with people and he can understand and he tells you stories, right? Because he actually understands something and empathizes with it and sees it. And I think that's why, you look at there are certain things that I've found just through life, for example, if someone's lost a spouse, I can talk to a man about that now. You have to kind of go through that to be really like you can share wisdom and you can be there, but there's just there are these unspoken things you just know. And I think that happens for people who go through recovery or other sorts of things. There's that knowing, like you say, to bring the procedural with the propositional together. But there's different ways to get it because there are great counselors who can help people in recovery that don't have it. But I think the ones who do have a little bit of a one-up on people.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing. So one thing that really hit me in one of my textbooks, they were doing studies to see like the relative effectiveness of different counselors. And there were counselors who had a 30% success rate. And there were counselors who had 100% success rate. And it's like 100%, like that tells you something. And my understanding is different counselors tend to have different capacities that help people. And the really good counselors can shift from one person to the other. And that's actually what he did in class, right? So like some students, when he was role playing, he would be really confrontational and really dominating. And then with other students, he would be very compassionate and, just like, so it was very different. And people would ask him, oh, well, why'd you decide to confront so-and-so, right? And he would give a BS answer because he didn't know why. And it was like, I'm not exactly sure why either, but I could kind of tell, like, okay, some people need a more confrontational approach, and some people need for you to just sit there and listen to them. And in fact, most of therapy, and this is what Peterson says all the time, most of therapy is just sitting there and listening. And that's actually like Chad's video today. Like he was talking about, Alcoholics Anonymous and the way you go through, like, yeah. And so some people, and a lot of people, what they need is just for you to sit there and listen to them. Right?
What has this coming to mind is in the Temple Grandin Peterson video, which I think for me is brilliant in so many ways and hilarious, by the way. But when she mentions the way that when she talked about how she thought was like this associative thinking. So there was a lot of when I was talking with other people in the corner about that conversation, they talked about, the thinking or the word thinking versus the sight thinking or the vision thinking. But for me, the most important thing that she mentioned was her associative thinking. And that to me is huge because that's how I really relate to that, because like you're talking about your professor, that's kind of, it sounds like what he's more doing. So he might not be able to explain how he's doing it.
He was brilliant. I mean, frankly, he did 2 role plays with me, and both times, like, I had to sit there and process it, and like it shook me to my core. Like, he is brilliant, and there's a reason they keep on hiring him to teach these courses, which he's incompetent to teach the course itself. It's the only class I took 3 classes this past semester. It's the only class I got anything out of, and it had nothing to do with what the guy was actually supposedly teaching, because like, and if I were running the program, yeah, I would hire him and have him teach the some substance abuse counseling course, probably one that's more, well, this is one of the beginning courses, like law and ethics. It's like one of the first courses you have to take before any of the other courses, and it's one of the core courses. So they have him teaching it, but it's like he knows diddly squat about the law and ethics of counseling.
But he showed you in the field work, which is where it's going to count the most.
Exactly. And it's like, I would hire him. I would hire him to teach law and ethics of counseling, because like it's a course the students should take. But like, it's kind of dumb that we should actually call it, it should actually be called I don't know, practice clinical training in counseling or something like that. And instead of supposedly having him teach this stupid textbook, like, I hated this textbook because I'm sitting there reading it, and it's like, so apparently like 10 years ago, some guy published this textbook, and I went and looked him up. Like, he has a master's degree in something like that he got 30 years ago, right? He's not a lawyer at all, right? So he wrote this law and ethics of counseling textbook, right? And it's been recalled. So our teacher so you can't even get it, right? Our teacher has copies of it, which he uses because he's been using the same textbook for 10 years, right? So it's a 10-year-old, outdated law and ethics book that like could never get published by somebody who's not a lawyer. And I'm just sitting there most of the class when they're talking about it, like, I don't even want to bother. Like, he's talking about, oh, you'll get sued, and I'm like, because of this and because of that. And basically he was just telling everybody, look, just be careful not to get sued, right? But so, okay, this is one of the things. So have you guys ever heard of a no harm agreement? It's this basic, it's just a piece of paper that when you're counseling someone, you know that they're thinking of harming themselves, you make them write out an agreement that they're not going to harm themselves, right? And sign it, right? And there's a therapeutic aspect of just signing that contract, right?
And usually it's limited to a time. Like, so instead of thinking like forever, and there's this trying to shrink that time down to say, let's just agree we're not signing this. We're not going to harm ourselves for 6 months or a year, just some period of time. So you can maybe think about, you give them the freedom to think, well, maybe you can but I want to take that off the table now. It's very powerful.
Yeah.
That's what that Scott Adams was talking about, that he gives with himself, right? I won't do it this year or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, it's doing the bite-sized things. Peterson talks about this all the time, right? Okay, you can't clean all of your room? Fine. Clean one drawer, right? Similar idea. But that's a therapeutic thing. There's no legal coverage.
Right. It's not legally binding.
And he was presenting it as if it's legally binding, and that it's like covering your behind, and like, you know, it's a legal liability thing. And one of the students, so many of the students were already working in substance abuse counseling, and she like works for the city, for the county mental health thing, and she's like, we don't have one of those in that we use. And he's like, oh, you can, you know, just I forget what it was. Either he said go online and find one, or he said go to the lawyers, right? And it's like, you can go to the lawyers. They're not gonna.
We're not going to have a no harm agreement because it's
right. This is not a legal thing, right? But like, he was presenting it as a legal thing, or she went and asked legal, and they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about.
Like, well, what you're saying is that I can't remember what darn leadership book it was, but it's getting the right people in the right seat on the bus. Yeah. He should be a professor and he should be doing these things, but he just was in the wrong class. You needed to move him out, like you say, to practical practice or something.
Yeah, yeah. Rabbi Malot, hi, Mallet, how you doing? We are whining about being sick.
We're whining about all sorts of stuff.
Yes.
What do you want to whine about, Chad? Is there something that's top of mind you've been bothering you here over the past couple of weeks?
Well, no, I think I've done enough whining about what I wanted to whine about. But I just wanted to make sure that, well, I want to apologize to the corner for being a little bitch and saying, I don't want to play, and then going away, and then being resentful at Chris Pacou when he said, oh, well, you'll be back. But the thing is there is something I do need to pay attention to the frequency and the volume of participation. It's probably not healthy for me mostly.
Yeah.
So one thing I've done to maybe ensure a little more embodiment in like physical embodiment with people in the corner is today I wrote 2 handwritten letters and I sent them off to 2 different people, because I think that this would be a good exercise to remind me that I am a part of the world and I don't need to be online all the time. And if I want to have really meaningful thoughts shared with other people and nobody else, then I can write it in a letter. And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it is an experiment that I'm trying. I don't think that I will be producing videos at the same frequency that I was. Hopefully not much at all. My hope for the channel, I've been toying with a couple of different ideas, really trying to step away from thinky talky and actually explore more fiction. And so I'm thinking it'd be fun to create short stories and share them on the channel. And then maybe if other people have short stories that they want shared, produce them into little audio versions so they can have their fiction shared. And just bring a little balance to the corner as a whole. So it's not all thinky talky, theological / philosophical conversation. Those things are good, but what else can we do that's not just those things? And so I don't have firepower to play in those realms anyways, to be quite honest.
So I made a video, parrhesia, which and it's always difficult for me to say the English way of saying it, because it's a word that's made its way into Hebrew as well as parrhesia. And yeah, I don't want to recap the entire video, but like, they're communicating with people is very different. In real life, you understand that, you know, there are conversations we have in a room to like just a few of us, and then there are conversations you have out in public, right? And the things you say to large groups as opposed to what you say in a small group, right? And what's happened in our society today is everybody's carrying around with them these recorders, and there's a, especially online, there's a lot of blurring the lines, right? Like I was in the car with a good friend of mine, and like I started saying things that I was like, oh my god, if like this wasn't a really good friend of mine, like I would never say these things, right? And it was just because we were joking around, right? It's not like, but we were joking around and saying like things that you just like, if he wanted to ruin my life, he could have just like, you know, recorded it, and like, I'm not sure it would have ruined my life, but it's like the type of thing you just don't say, right? Even jokingly anymore, right? But that's because we live in such a different world than with all of these devices and with online. Like certainly, you know, there's 16 people watching us just have a little conversation.
They think we're gonna fight.
Say that again?
They think we're gonna fight.
Are we? Good.
Hell,
Rabbi Mullah says, Refuah Shlema, thank you, amen. Means you should be fully healed. Bart forgives us, or you. Aaron is sick as well. Freedom's lunch apparently has acid reflux. Okay, I've had that before too. Writing stories sounds like fun. Yes, it does. Chad, maybe you could start a Discord. I thought you had a Discord. Didn't you have a Discord?
I have a Discord for our Peter Pan story.
There's so many Discord. Like I belong to 200 different Discord servers.
Wow.
Start a mail list. I used to run a poetry man in the 90s, all through the mail. Oh, that might be something to talk about. Now, why would somebody in a wrestling mask fight?
Great question.
Hey, Fezzy, how you doing?
Shalom.
Sandy says, don't think you're going to fight. Just home from work. I'm writing to homework. I have no presuppositions. This is white noise background that sometimes floats to the surface.
I get it. I tell you what, the couple weeks or whatever, however long I was away, I don't know, it was 2 or 1 weeks, whatever. I listened to 2 audiobooks, 2 different Cormac McCarthy books, and I'm on my 3rd one. And so that was it was real nice to step away and just listen to some good books. So that's what got me.
I've been lucky that, you know, how I've used this. I've occasionally gotten sucked into silly stuff here or there when it comes to kind of this little corner of the internet. But I've always approached it mainly as being relational. Like I want to meet people and get to know people and have real sort of relationships. And the other thing, but this is probably kind of the way I'm wired, but I try to take these conversations and everything I'm trying to figure out how I can apply it in my life, right? So whether that be in relationships, whether that be in my program of recovery. And the other thing I've done is these really interesting, some of the theological things and, you know, listening to, like, I love it when you guys really, you and Hezi or others really start unpacking Torah, Talmud, all the just talk about those things. Like I really like wisdom stuff. And then I have a place, you know, that a lot of these people have turned me on to such amazing things that then I go try and put that to practice. in my services in the temple I go to, Jacob, right? So I have these places where I'm trying to actually live these things out. And so Discord for me, and just this little corner for me, has actually been a net positive. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I was off Twitter for 2 years till Elon kind of purchased it.
Yeah.
I've cultivated what I follow, so I'm not just stuck in the political rat race. I'm following a lot of people from this little corner, and I'm not on there as much, and that's better. So I'm trying to just have a healthier relationship with it. And the one thing I have to really watch, mainly for me, is Twitter. Like I have to really, because I kind of got sucked into that for a while, and that was really affecting my spirit. So, man, the way I've approached this, the distributed cognition and people pointing me to things to go and to go find and see and consume. I have sped up, things you had to find on your own, where you're studying on your own or learning on your own. I've been able to really speed up over these past couple of years. Integration, understand just some things putting together that have been really powerful for me. And that's what I really appreciate about it, is the speed with which you can, because we've got some amazing people in here with a lot of wisdom and a lot of talents and a lot of experience.
Yeah, I love all that too. I think where I start to come apart at the seams is it's just something that I think I'm allergic to, where I feel like, so if I go to an AA meeting and somebody's telling me how I need to worship or how I shouldn't worship, I want to fucking.
Chad got a phone call, which is funny. Hey.
Rip somebody's face off when somebody's telling me how I should or shouldn't worship.
Right.
And so then I become like, so when I start to encounter that in other places, I have like a built-in reaction to that.
Well, okay, so I have to say, this is one of the things I learned in my substance abuse courses, which is actually people who have addictions tend to personalize everything.
No, I don't.
What?
Yes. Go ahead.
And so, like, yeah, I would never, like, if I'm talking to you, I would never tell you how to worship, right? But then I have like 5 different people who have asked me, "Hey, Jacob, like, how should a Noahide worship God?" Right? And it's like, the people who are coming to my channel for that are coming for a very different reason than Chad is, right? And that's part of the problem. Like, my video with Father Stephen, that has like over 200 watch hours already. That's 100 people listening, right? And I can't be speaking to each one individually, right? And it's really, really hard. And in fact, after the conversation, I talked with Father Stephen, and I was like, okay, do you have any advice about navigating this? And he did, like, because he has to navigate this on a much larger scale than I do, right? Because everything he says, there are thousands of people listening, and like, different people get different things out of it, and you can't. And I think that's actually one of the most important parts of what Jordan Peterson has been saying, is like, you have to be able and willing to be. And he said this during his interview with what's her name, Kathy Newman. He said, like, you can't. You have to, in order to say anything important, you have to risk offending someone, right? Yeah. And like, I don't want to necessarily offend some people, And I do want to offend other people, because sometimes the right thing to do, and yeah, this is actually one of the things like I've been thinking about in terms of Jewish culture versus Christian culture, because you see Jesus in the Gospels, like talking the way rabbis talk to each other, and then I see Christians reading that and completely misunderstanding, right? It's like Jesus is like, they're whitewashed tombs, right? It's like, that's horrible, right? And it's like, this is a charge of hypocrisy that like rabbis make left and right at each other, right? I'm actually probably, so I'm thinking, because of the whole Zionism thing, like, and I don't want to get into the Zionism thing, but like, there are all these Jews who are bringing Zionism into my channel. I don't know who let them on my channel.
You did.
But there's a book that, so two of the rabbis that I respect greatly were the Rebbe, the Hasidic Grand Rabbi of Chabad, which is one of the Hasidic dynasties. I like, if you think of denominations within Hasidism, like, so Chabad is one of the big ones, and Satmar is actually the biggest Hasidic dynasty, right? So the two rabbis that I really respected, the Satmar Rebbe and the Chabad Rebbe, right? They spoke fire against each other. Like, you read the types of things, like the types of things they said about each other. Like, a lot of it was jokes and funny, but like, it got really bad when a group of Satmar Hasidim grabbed a Chabad Hasid and shaved half of his beard off. They cut half of his beard off. Okay? Now you have to understand what that means in a Hasidic community, because he can't cut the other half off. So he went through the rest of his life with half a beard, right? And that's like a horrible thing to do to somebody, right? And you kind of have to go, well, why are these rabbis speaking in such a way that can lead to such animosity, right? And so there's a book that another rabbi I respect very much, who was a student of the Chabad Rebbe, wrote, explaining the things that the Satmar Rebbe said, and explaining, look, he's saying these things in order to get people to understand the importance of his points, right? And similarly, I think the Rebbe, and so the whole book is like, in essence, explaining how these two rabbis totally agree with each other, and but they have differences of opinion, and in order to activate their Hasidim, their congregations, and lead them, some of the things they say are exaggerations or a bit beyond, right? For example, I'll give an example. So there's a big question about whether or not religious Jews should vote in Israel. Okay? And the Satmar Rebbe was against them voting, and the Rebbe was for them. The Chabad Rebbe was for them voting. So the Satmar Rebbe gave a whole bunch of reasons why a religious Jew should not vote in the Israeli elections. And Rabbi Khan explains that, like, some of those things, like him calling it idolatry to go vote in the Israeli elections, right? He shows variously why it, like, obviously he didn't believe it was actual idolatry to go vote in the Israeli elections, right? But he's trying to get his Hasidim not to vote. And similarly, like, the Rebbe is trying to get his Hasidim to go vote. They're trying to convince people, right? And there's going to be, like, this conflict. And I almost made this video today, but we let our ideas die so we don't have to. We have conflict in what we say so that we don't get into physical conflict.
Yeah, but I like dying with my ideas.
But verbal conflict is actually really, really important. And it matters.
Well, that's probably true. But again, like I'm like a weird AA fundamentalist in some sense. And they say, in our tradition, we say we have resigned from the debating society. And there's a reason for that. There's also a reason why I'm not on Twitter and never have been. So there's always that kind of background thinking that's driving me around, especially like when I feel like I'm embedded in this community. And so then I feel like, you know, for some strange reason, I'm supposed to be a voice for others like me, just like I'm sure other people around here feel. And so the voice that wants to be heard doesn't want to debate, yet it desperately wants to debate because, boy, do I like being right. But I also feel like, part of me feels like, geez, you have a lot to offer, Jacob. And
I thought you were talking to yourself. You have a lot to offer, Chad. You do.
Well, so part of me feels like Jacob has a lot to offer, and he's not as good as he could be when he says things like, let's burn a church. Even if
first of all, you have to understand. Okay, so this is the thing.
It's a joke.
No, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. See, that's the thing, Chad. Okay. So let me explain. The fact that Jacob is not as good as he could be, you're yeah, that's just gonna happen.
No, I get that, but there's
but yeah, I understand. You think I should not talk about burning down Lutheran churches. I understand that.
There's a very strong sense that he's closer to what he could be than he knows. And he's tiptoeing away from it in a way that is. There's a way to say and do what you want to say and do without having to use the words of flames.
Chad, the reason I talk about burning Lutheran churches down is because those are the exact words that Martin Luther used about synagogues.
Okay.
He said, burn them down.
And fuck that guy. Seriously.
Well, you just got it. Yes.
No, I've known this. I've known what you're saying. That still doesn't mean That still doesn't think that doesn't mean I think you should say it.
Chad,
heard that two wrongs don't make a right?
No. And Caleb just said the exact same thing. Two wrongs don't make a right. I'm not doing a wrong. What I am doing is I am reminding Lutherans that Luther was a bad person. And
okay,
when somebody has that visceral reaction, somebody has that, hey, how dare you say, and it's like, well, when you bring it up with Lutherans that Luther wrote such things, right? They will start saying, oh, that was the time. But when you actually show them, hey, you don't like this either. So don't start telling me what Jordan B. Cooper does, which is, oh, we need to read all of what Luther, and we need to care what Luther himself, right? This is one of the ways of talking. Like, I'm not going to talk to you that way.
I know. Okay.
But there are lots and lots of people like Jordan B. Cooper who need to hear, hey, you can't try to contextualize Martin Luther the way you are trying to contextualize Martin Luther, because Martin Luther was a bad human being.
Right. Okay. So all that said is fine. Then there's another level to this, though. Like, so I am a member of a Lutheran church. Do I consider myself Lutheran? No, I don't give a fuck about that. Now, what I really care about are the people that are there. You know, like, we got an email that one of the gentlemen there, his wife just passed away. And that's, like, you know, a part of the community. And so we wanted to say hi to Bob and greet him and give him our condolences. And we'll be there on Friday. And so, this is a very small community. I mean, like, the town they're in is like 500 people. And the church is like, there's like 3 churches there. And like 2 of them or 3 of them are Lutheran. And so it's like, what I'm getting at here is, I understand what you're saying. Okay. But then what would you have them do? Like, just unravel their whole DNA of their community and like be something else because you said
this is why conversations and discussions have contexts, right? There's a context to, like, I don't walk into Lutheran churches and start yelling at them about how Martin Luther was a bad person. Right. Like, I would never do that, right? At the same time, when we are having a serious theological discussion in which Jordan B. Cooper is trying to refute the fact that John Vervaeke says that Martin Luther was harmful to society, and they're trying to convince large numbers of people, many of them who've never walked into a Lutheran church and may not even know who Martin Luther is. Like, you saw on your video, I started having a discussion in the comment threads with somebody, and at the end of it, he's like, okay, boil this down to me so I don't have to watch an hour video, because I kept on saying, if you want to hear the fully nuanced thing, like, you can go listen to Vervaeke's response to Cooper, and that's what I called Vervaeke's bullshit. Which, look, Vervaeke does this really nice thing of very nicely and apologetically, and, you know, in a very nuanced fashion, explaining why Martin Luther bad. But that's the TLDR. That's the too long didn't read. Martin Luther bad of his video. And if I don't say Martin Luther bad, there's a lot of people who are not going to understand that.
Well, and I think one of the things I'm thinking about, which is we all have our roles to play, right? And we all are made a certain way, are going to have a certain voice and a certain style, you know? And so when I think about, like, when you talk about what you do, Jacob. It's not dissimilar to what Kanye's doing right now. And if you see behind the scenes, what he's trying to just push the Overton window to the max. And what he's trying to expose is, if we can't say certain things, we'll never be able to have the right kind of conversations we need to have with each other. And so he knows exactly what he's doing when he's put.
I don't think he knows what he's doing.
Pardon me?
But I think he's doing something that he doesn't know what he's doing. He's an artist.
Both ways. No, the unintended consequences, whatever. Yeah. But there's a lot more intentionality of trying to expose, and he wants to he sees the game that's being played now is so rigged. He's trying to just basically turn over the game and turn over the pieces. So there's some thought behind it that's not being there. But to go to the next level, and the thing I would say for you, Jacob, is in some ways your nature is to be a bit of a firebrand and to say those things, and that's kind of how you want to communicate. The question,
I have to say, Lance,
here's the question I would say.
Let
me finish. Just finish. You respond to this. Sometimes what I watch with you, and the question would be, like, if we're doing it live, but if we were one-on-one, I'd say, is that truly the way that you can be most effective? Like, is it the most effective and persuasive way? Can you find some place where you're firebranding while still having a little more? I mean, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, Jacob, but we all need to self-reflect and say, okay, am I getting because sometimes the effect is to get people off kilter and to shock them a little bit. And that is the best way to do it. And other times there's a place in the middle, because I'm with you, being too kind and apologetic and soft.
No, Lance, this is really important. And it goes back to what I said about the counseling, right? The counselor who's 100% effective, there's a reason why he can be 100% effective, because he's dealing with people individually. No style of communication. And this is part of the problem. Like, how I would communicate with this person is very different from how I would communicate with that person.
But also how you want to move the most people. Like, there is the most effective way to reach the most people to have the best impact. And I totally get
part of the problem on the internet is, if you're not, like, look at the big channels. They're the entertaining ones. Like, you look at Zion Lex, right? It kills me that Zion Lex is charging people $300, right? I keep on putting this poster up because it like, did I remove it? Oh no, I still have it. Okay. You see this? This kills me, right? Because, like, the guy doesn't actually know Hebrew.
I've watched your videos. I watched a couple of them when you got in your spat, and you every night you were going on. You kept going on.
I because I had to humiliate him, right? And the fact is, that's who his audience listens to. There's a reason why his audience listens to him, right? Because he's entertaining, and I can sit there and nicely teach Hebrew for free on YouTube all you want, but I gained a bunch of subscribers from those videos I made making fun of him and, confronting him and all that, right?
Sure, and it's sure. And I'm not saying, and again, I don't know the right answer, but we all need to look back to, and so for example, for you,
Caleb says being offensive gets clicks, and he's right.
It does. But the question and we all need to do that. I mean, people, like, I was really confused when people got so worked up over Jordan Peterson and the Daily Wire Plus. Like, I couldn't understand it, because you probably have a Democratic or a leftist bent, and you just see this stuff over there. And I kind of know what the Daily Wire folks are about. But here's what I knew about Jordan Peterson. He was going to do interesting Bible stuff. He was going to have interesting conversations like he's always had. He was going to get in fights with people about the culture war stuff, just the same way. That's how he burst on the scene in Canada. That's why we know his name, right? He was just going to be Jordan Peterson. And what has he done since he's gone to Daily Wire Plus? He's just being Jordan Peterson. I knew he wasn't going to change because of it. He just found a safe repository for his content. And he's able to keep all of it, and he's got it off these cancellation platforms. And so, and so Jordan's going to be a bit of a fire. Like everyone wants to tell Jordan, oh, he shouldn't say this or he shouldn't say that, right? Well, who are we to tell him what he should and shouldn't be saying?
Well, okay, so Father
and
Eric,
I would equate that to you, Jacob, too, right? Like, again, I'm not saying you shouldn't act a certain way.
Father Eric brings up a good point. He says, "Fools deserve our scorn, but how do we speak to the wise?" Okay, and the fact is, you should not speak to the wise the way you speak to fools, right? There are people, for example, Anselman, who I just make fun of left and right.
I get it.
When he shows up, I call him an idiot, and I say he has no idea what he's talking about, and that's how I engage with Anselman. Like, I would never, ever, ever engage with either one of you. Like, almost anybody on the channel, like who comes on the channel. But first of all, Anselman, even if he were to come on my channel, if he were to click on the post, which he won't do, but if he did, I would actually be nicer to him because I am speaking to him. Right?
Yeah, he's anonymous, a guy that never shows up anywhere and participates in anything.
Well, but the thing is, it's YouTube comments, and in YouTube comments, if you don't answer, like, so Anselman was making comments on PVK's video where he was saying Father Stephen DeYoung knows nothing about Orthodox Christianity, and yes, Father Stephen DeYoung with the PhD, who's going for his second PhD, who's an archpriest and one of the most well-known and Eastern Orthodox priests in the United States, possibly the world, right?
In good standing, able to give communion and take confession by people who know what they're doing, right?
and who teaches at seminaries, right? It's like,
yes,
and Anselman is like authoritatively saying how Father Stephen doesn't know and understand Christianity, and it's like, well, I could very nicely say to Anselman, right? You're being silly. You shouldn't say that, right? And frankly, a lot of people have. But in the comments of Paul's video, somebody needs to call him an idiot.
I did. Someone
asked because there are other people reading.
I did it once, and because I'd had enough after a year. He was following around. Now you'd probably like to see us following around Luke because anything Luke says.
I do it whenever necessary.
But at any rate, it was just kind of this sort of fundamentalist response. And I said, somebody asked, what does this mean? I said, don't worry. He just shit posts all the time anonymously. That was because that's what he's done. He's fundamentalist shit posting on everything.
Well, I think he actually I think PVK did speak to him. Look, the fact is the guy, I mean, I would never be this mean to him in real life if I had an option, because frankly, I know a little bit more about his life, and in real life, if I was only talking to him, I would never, ever, ever
and I don't do that either. But it had been a year and a half of comments of mean things and rude things said to people over and over that I do know. And I finally once had to just basically make one comment. And here was my opinion about that. If you're going to continually act like an ass in comments, I can make one comment to you that's, whatever. That's at least that's the way I
have a question. So from the wisdom of you guys, what should I do moving forward? That doesn't include leaving.
Honestly, watch less of my channel. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like this was part of my discussion with Father Stephen. Like I was like, and it's not just you. There's a reason why I engage publicly with you, Chad, because it's not just you. And yes, Father Eric is right. You should do more comedy because we love your comedy. But there are other friends of mine. I'm thinking of somebody in particular who like hasn't even been talking to me, and I tried reaching out to him because he was offended too, and he's not the type of person to he like people don't know him. He's in the background. He's a lurker. He's not somebody who says things, right? And you're saying something very important, and it's really important to have voices like yours, Chad, saying the things you do. And I'm not sure it's the best for you, but it's the best for our little corner to have you saying, the stuff that you do. At the same time, it's like, okay, I'm talking to 100 people, and you can't speak to 100 people the way you speak to individuals. You just can't. And sometimes you have to consider, if I humiliate and hurt one person, right? If I humiliate Zion Lex, right? Is that the best thing for him? Am I being loving to him, or Jordan Cooper, frankly, when it gets to people who are putting themselves in the spotlight, I kind of have to go, okay, now you're like, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen type thing, right?
Father Eric said that to me, and that's one of the things that pushed me over the edge. I was like, oh, fuck you, Father.
Father Eric is very, very wise.
I love Eric, but he pissed me off.
So Garth says, but Jacob, listening to you dunk on Paul in the New Testament makes me want to learn more about Paul. Look, different people have very different reactions. But I have to say, like, Chad, spend more time with Father Eric. He's not that far away from you. Go out and visit.
Well, I like Father Eric. I go on his live chat and stream except for last night because I was like still like, nah.
I missed it by 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Chad, here'd be my advice. In the same way you will hear crazy things and things you don't agree with in a meeting, but you just have to let that go, that's, you know what I mean? Just that kind of sense, which is every now and again, I get peeked up into it, but I kind of take what I want to take from this corner and leave what I want to leave. And when certain conversations go a certain way, I don't watch the videos. I don't participate in that thing. And, because there are some things that Jacob and I really, really disagree about. There's a lot of things we really, really agree about. So if there are certain things where he's on it, I'll listen to him. But if he's going to really want to get it out of his system, I just don't pay attention to that aspect of what he's talking about. And I know that doesn't offend him at all. He's like, great, okay, whatever. And so, you talk about that personal thing, is that sense of, because here's what I really love about you being in this little corner, and this is needed. You don't have a filter. And you say what which is really good. I appreciate people who say what needs to be said, and sometimes in not the most artful ways, because both you and Grim Grizz have really good sight to see through the thing behind the thing. Like your videos, how you connect this talk with this and putting things together. You are gifted, Chad. And you put together things in this little corner that I think are some of the most insightful stuff that I've seen. So we need to have you participate. So whatever it is, so it doesn't piss you off. So then you go not be a nice person 10 minutes after you get off of whatever you're participating in. We need to get away from that. But
yeah, and again, I don't think it's necessarily Jacob or it's something in me. I understand that. But But then there's like I know I have this off balanced strong sense of justice. So all of a sudden I want to turn into fucking Batman, because I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? What are you doing to destroy this beautiful thing we are building? And then I have to like be just like this weirdo. So I have to, yeah.
There's enough of a thought difference, Chad, that you can just, I think you can just let it be the same way you do in your other worlds, and just kind of let people have that. And
Yeah,
before we get to Sam,
I'm,
Dominic has a question here. But
Yeah, I didn't want to derail the conversation, but I want Lance's opinion as well, or I would have talked to Dominic individually. But so Lance is also well, he's actually a lawyer, but not me. But a JD will teach you a lot of things. The first year of law school taught me a lot of things, which are very, very worthwhile. It is not a degree I would get if you're looking to earn money. Like it's not. Is it worth it economically? No. It's worth it in terms of maybe a little stature with people. And it's worth it if you're looking to learn something. But 50% of people who get JDs never take the bar ever at all. And another 50% of the people who pass the bar stop practicing within 2 years. And I believe another 50% of those within 10 years. Right? So like if you're getting a JD to become a lawyer, you better be darn sure you want to become a lawyer. And like only 20% of lawyers ever walk into a courtroom ever.
yeah.
My advice is go into the construction trades. We need you.
Absolutely. Well, and I would just say this. So my son's got accepted into law school, and he's kind of working and just seeing if he wants to do that. So here's what I told him. First, I pressed him hard on why he wanted to do it. Like, why do you want to do this? If it's merely to go out and make a lot of money, and you can make a lot of money doing, I'm not saying, but if it's merely just to go make money, or you think you want to work at a big law firm, like you have this idea of what that is. I was fortunate enough to do that, but I also was at the top of my class in law review and everything else. And I had worked ahead of time. And, I just was gifted in being able to do well in law school. And so, but I went there and I hated the big firm practice. It was awful. Like I knew I was just going through the crucible of 2 years to get it going. But here's the value of what I think law school is. If you enjoy learning, I passed the CPA exam. I'm CPA. Went to seminary and MDiv equivalency, done lots of stuff. The single greatest thing that has helped me to be able to critically think, because the Socratic method in law school, and like Jacob says, that first year, it gives you a way of processing information, of thinking. My writing went through the roof after going through law school, my ability to write well. And so I went out and I was in a law firm, but I became a business lawyer. Then I went to seminary. And still today, I use the skills and the things that I learned from law school and being a lawyer in my job today. And I'm a vice president, and I do some legal stuff, but that's not primarily what I do. So I felt my time in law school, I have leaned on that training and that learning and that skill set more in my career since then than I did in undergrad, and I was in honors programs and all that other stuff. So it really depends. If you want the education and you want to go through that process, and I would say don't have making money is the reason why you would do that. Although I would say most of my friends who did go to law school have gone on to have very fruitful careers and providing for their families. And just like Jacob said, a lot of them, although I'm a lawyer, I'm not technically a practicing lawyer now, but I use it every day in my career. So I really want to do it.
Yeah. And part of it, I have to say, Like a lot of people who were in law school with me knew a lot of things I didn't, in terms of being successful in law school. And one of the things, because their parents were lawyers and stuff, and so there is certain advantages. And a lot of the students there, they were, for example, going to inherit a large business, and they were going to law school to learn how to run the business that they were going to run. And that's a great thing to do, right? So, but that doesn't mean if you go to law school, you're going to get to run a huge business. So you have to imagine, you have to realize why you're going to law school. And it's not, I made a lot of mistakes when I decided to go to law school. And one of the biggest mistakes I made was I was offered a full scholarship at Pepperdine. And
I'm just imagining you at Pepperdine, Jacob. That would have been hilarious. For those who don't know, Pepperdine is like the conservative evangelical school that also happens to be in Malibu on the beach.
That was my dream school, by the way, Sam.
Yeah. I went there. I toured there. I applied there.
And I went to USC. And part of the problem was at USC, I was not one of the best students. I was not one of the smartest, whereas at Pepperdine, I would have been. So funny thing about Pepperdine, when you apply, you have to write an essay about how you're going to contribute to Christian life.
I'm going to take down
YouTube
all
channel.
of Tarsus.
Well,
for some reason, I will surround myself with Christians.
Well, this is funny because I was applying when I was getting back from yeshiva, right? And so I wrote one sentence. It was as a practicing Jew who tries to learn from and exemplify the teachings of the law of Moses, I would hope that would be a contribution to Christian life at Pepperdine. That's all I wrote.
That's pretty
and
good.
They offered me a full scholarship, so at least they didn't hate it.
So Dominic, if you want to get a skill set and you want to have that education and you want to go through that transformational process, I think it's great. The other thing I would recommend is find out what you're passionate about, and there's a lot of amazing things you can do where you don't make a lot of money right away. Like I wish I would have gone and done prosecute. I was great at courtroom stuff, but if you go to a big law firm, you won't see the courtroom until your 7th, 8th year, right? You just sit there writing. So there are different things that you can do. And the one thing I will just come here now that Sam came on here, which is one of the things I noticed, and I flirted with Reformation theology for a little bit, Sam, but if you're a lawyer and you read Calvin, he was a lawyer.
He was, yeah.
He's making his argument. He's writing his brief, boom, 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 systematizing it. Like a lawyer gets when you're reading Calvin. He was an amazing lawyer.
And he was a horrible theologian.
The problem is when you play some of that stuff out to the end, I'd always be like, I just can't. Like, there's another brief I'd like to write because I don't agree with yours.
He should have stuck to law.
So, Chad, how are you doing?
I'm good.
You're not leaving us, are you?
No.
Good. All right.
Not if I fucking wanted to, you bastards.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good. We need
How do
you.
I quit you? Somebody's gonna have to do that Brokeback Mountain thing with Chad and TLC.
You could do it with me.
Is today your return? No, is today your return, Chad? Or have you done it previously?
I made a couple videos.
Was your New Year's resolution to get back in on the bomb train?
I don't believe in New Year's resolutions.
Okay, that's good. I do.
There's a difference between a resolution and a decision, and my resolution was to quit this little corner, and clearly it didn't work. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I just had an interview for my channel. I'm kind of uploading and doing my editing work on the side. Saw that you guys were still in here, so thought I'd hop in.
Shout out.
Is it
Shout
with
out. Huge interview.
DeYoung?
What? No, I didn't even interview Stephen DeYoung. I've been lapped by Jacob on interviewing Stephen DeYoung, and now I can't do it for like a month or two, right? Because then it's like I'm just like trying to write his coattails or something. So, you know, I was thinking about reaching back out and having, you know, a three-way between Jacob and DeYoung and myself, but now I can't do that. It looks like they're going steady. So,
well, actually, so I might suggest that to him, but I hadn't heard of the Lord of Spirits is having a conference in Pennsylvania right around Halloween.
nah, that's funny.
So I'm thinking of going to that.
Of course you are. Yeah.
That sounds. Jacob, that sounds like something I would be highly interested in.
And Father Stephen said there's going to be D&D. So
okay, never mind. I've got better things to do.
Lance and I need to actually start our series here pretty shortly.
Next week, let's get it back going and finish it out.
Okay.
I haven't actually listened to. I've only listened to the first 20 minutes or something, Jacob, of your most recent talk with DeYoung because I've been pretty busy this past weekend with it being New Year's and all those sorts of things. So, what was the two? What did you guys cover?
Martin Luther bad.
Martin Luther bad. Okay, boring.
Protestant. Church burn, church. All that.
Well, people don't realize that his first PhD, he was a CRC Reformed school he went to for his first PhD.
For his master's, yeah. Might have been. No, his PhD was recent, and he's working on.
So was it only a master's? It was only a master's, but that was a Reformed biblical college he was at for his master's.
Yeah, he's CRC. Yeah, he comes from. That's why he was able to teach me to call Paul Domini Vanderclay.
Yeah, I've also, because of the holidays, have been unplugged here for 2 weeks. But I saw you had Father DeYoung. It came up in my queue. I will watch it this week, Jacob. I'm excited. Your first one was great.
Thank you. Yeah,
well, that's why I'm wondering what you still had left to talk about. Have you figured out if Orthodoxy is properly Noahide yet?
Well, right now we're just trying to find out if his version of Eastern Orthodox Christianity is Judaism or not, and that's been a lot more. So, like, there are a few sticking points, but like the way he's describing Eastern Orthodox Christianity, like I keep on telling him, A, what have we been fighting about for the past 2,000 years? And B, I'm waiting for the other Christians to come and lynch you as a Judaizer.
Well, Jacob, I'll tell you, one of the things, having immersed myself in Orthodoxy here for a little over 2 years now, that I've done it. In your first conversation, there were some things you were talking about, kind of when you were talking about Noahides and how we saw that God is the God of everyone, right? And when he's having a conversation, it's harder when you're having the conversation than if you're just watching or whatever. There were many times I wanted to communicate, as you were saying, this is how we see it. I'm like, no, that's absolutely what Orthodoxy is talking about. And then, for example, like when we take the Eucharist, we're taking it for the world. And the point is to go out and take it to the people who aren't taking it. Like, you're taking that out into the world. It's for everyone, right? Even though there are those things around it. So I would just say, talking with you and particularly talking with Hezi, I'm seeing more connections than I've ever seen in my life, Jacob. I thought there was all this disconnect, but what I'm doing in my weekly services and practices and my prayer rules, like I've kept this, Jacob,
Oh,
that you gave me,
yeah.
because this is very much what we do,
Yeah.
you know? And so,
And if you need
No,
to
I mean-
dispose of it, go to a proper location.
Yes. So Garth always asks the good questions. Is Christianity Judaism? Well, so this is the thing. Like, I can tell you quite clearly the places where obviously, like, a Lutheran understanding of Christianity is very, very different. And so my understanding was things like penal substitutionary atonement. And this is like the stuff Anselman says. He's like, all Christians believe in penal substitutionary atonement. And like,
I don't know what that is.
Don't worry about it, Chad. He's just trying to criticize Lutheranism again.
well, actually, don't worry about it, Chad, because frankly, I think penal substitutionary atonement at this point in your life might be a way of understanding things that's helping you. And I would never take that away from you. But I think eventually you're going to want to start thinking about your relationship with God in a way that's very different.
Are you
One
saying
thing.
to
Go
go
ahead.
to
Go ahead.
What?
I was going to say one thing that I kind of want. Even in the first 20 minutes that I wanted to stick in my neck in with your conversation with DeYoung is like, man, in these like Constantinian period and afterwards, there is some heavy anti-Judaism in Eastern Orthodoxy.
I mentioned that.
Okay, I don't know if you got to that, but like I'm like, I'm preparing. Hank and I are doing our second episode on the Council of Nicaea on Friday, and the reason why Constantine argued that they should change the celebration date for Easter was because that we wouldn't want to celebrate on the same day that the Jews are doing their Passover, and the Jews are the enemy of the truth and the crucifiers of Christ, and basically every Christian anti-Judaism trope is in Constantine's address for why we're changing the date of Easter. And
I mentioned, exactly. Yeah, I mentioned.
That's why there's a difference between, you absolutely see that, right? And human beings, what they're going to say. But I just said, since I've immersed myself in it, there's a very different thing in immersing yourself in the services and the prayer rules. Like, we read the Psalms so much, Jacob, and you see these things like if you immerse yourself in the practice of it and the heart of it. And by the way, today you can even see like Father DeYoung is a very different priest than the priest that's at my church. And then you can have like a Father Peter Hears, and you can have a universalist like, may he rest in peace, Callistos Ware. You have this broad people who have these broad kind of viewpoints, even though they're all still in good standing.
Well, yeah, the answer that Father Stephen gave was the church fathers are not infallible.
Exactly.
And because I brought up
canons from the Council of Nicaea are, for the record, though, they are.
Okay, so this is like this is so yeah. Caleb's actually very right here. Sounds Protestant, and this is one of the things I keep on telling him. Like, I'm like, I think American Eastern Orthodoxy is really, really Protestant.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because
even entertaining friendly relations
in actually the
Judaism,
good ways of Protestantism.
They're taking that Americans kind of from dispensationalism, pro-Semiticism, and then it's kind of transferring over, and so they haven't gotten that old world dose of anti-Judaism.
The people, the people that come are Protestant. I mean, all the converts are, and you are, like you say, Lance, you're not an Orthodox, and I totally get that. But I think one of the things I would say, Caleb, which I think is a little bit different, which I'm seeing, which is instead of breaking off into all these denominations and having these confessions, which then say we're right, you're wrong, is allowing the difference of opinion to exist all under the same church, I think is powerful and valuable.
That's why I love AA.
Yeah.
Got your understanding, baby.
Father Eric says the Catholics here are kind of Protestant too. And this is one of the things I keep on saying. When we criticize Protestantism here in the United States, we're speaking in a culture that is deeply Protestant already. And so, like, and Father Eric actually brought it up himself. It's like he's looking at the things that were fights during the Reformation, and like there's been a lot of movement towards, like, the Reformation has definitely changed the Roman Catholic Church from how it was.
Unbelievably much. Like,
yeah,
like I call this the denominationalization process, right?
Yeah.
Where instead of being the civilizational church of Christendom, or Western Christendom versus Eastern Christendom, you know, you're one denomination among others. People can freely go to your church or not. You know, all of these sorts of things, you know, are
there he is,
a Protestantization or a denominationalization. But you're right, Jacob, that, you know, even when we're criticizing Protestantism, we're doing it in a very Protestant way, because, like, you know, I like reading the 1800s era Unitarians, and they hate Calvinism, man. They despise, no one can write better anti-Calvinist stuff than mid 1800s American Unitarians. But what did they grow up? What were their parents? They were Puritan New England Calvinists, right?
Well,
and they still have way more of it in them than they realize, right? And there is that weird thing to be overcritical of your own environment, but without being fully aware that it's the water you're swimming in. That's a dynamic that bugs me.
Yes, but I have to make this point.
How does that relate? How does all of this stuff, at the end of the day, how does it relate to how we relate to God and how we serve our brothers and sisters?
Be kinder to your parents and be more gentle with the things that you don't like about your parents.
Fourth commandment.
Yes. So
Sixth commandment, but it's okay. You guys don't know how to number the commandments. Same text, you just misnumber them.
It's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Paul Antliner shared a article by, I think his name was Philip Bartlett, who was really interesting. He was in the Occupy movement, so he had rejected all of his Christianity or whatever, and he came back now that he's the story we're hearing in this little corner of the internet. As he's looking back now, and he's being exposed to, and Jonathan, he mentioned Vervaeke and Pajot were two people that had impacted him. But as he's looking back now, he's realizing the wisdom of, just going back to what you said, Sam, of his father, right? And he had a partner. He didn't think it was going to be a husband. And now he sees the value, and he's like, wait a minute, we're throwing out these thousands of years of wisdom. And he's finding his way back to respect, right?
I don't want this point to be lost, though. When we criticize Protestants, right, in this culture, we are criticizing what is unique about Protestants in this culture.
In the meta Protestant context.
Again, you're not getting my point, Sam.
Okay.
Which is the things which Protestant, like the good things out of Protestantism are givens, right? Because to the point that we've adopted them, right? And then when we see something that's completely outside, we have to recognize, and I guess this does go back to respecting your fathers, is we have to recognize that we've gained something or advanced somewhat. So on New Year's Eve, I had some Muslims, not New Year's Eve, on Christmas night, I had a live stream for everybody who didn't have Christmas. And so some Muslims came on my channel, and we started talking about how denominationalism, I don't even know how to say this.
Denominationalization.
Yes. And it really is a word, and it's really something that I guess it is the Peace of Westphalia created. But infecting it's infecting Judaism, and it's already infected Judaism, and it's infecting Islam in ways that they really did not have.
Or even Hinduism, right? Like the Hindus in Silicon Valley, they go to a temple, right? And they have their weddings there, and they even start having weekly services often, even though that's not their tradition back home. And all these things, they become a Christian denomination that's Hindu.
I'll beat you one. Here in Malibu is the largest Hindu temple in the Western Hemisphere. And there are smaller Hindu temples here in Los Angeles that people who don't like the priests that temple go to.
So there's a mega Hindu temple pastor.
There's the Catholic Basilica in Malibu, and then there are all these Protestant house Hindu temples all over Los Angeles.
So what I hear you saying, Jacob, is that all of the good things from Protestantism we've sort of taken and absorbed at such a fundamental level that Protestants and non-Protestants alike now agree on it. But then the parts of Protestantism that haven't reached that level are mostly the bad parts of Protestantism. And so when we criticize Protestantism, we're criticizing that leftover that wasn't so thoroughly integrated in that deep way. But then when you do that too heavily, it pisses off people like Chad who just want to go to their Lutheran church with their kids and whatever.
Hey, Luke.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Luke.
So a couple things. What this reminds me of is my big debate with Charlie about POS theology that I thought Charlie just fundamentally misunderstood. And this is what I would say to Chad is I would say there's a big difference between critiquing a spirit that manifests a certain pattern in communities and individuals over time, which is, I think, a big part of what Vervaeke is talking about and what I've always been talking about. The theology creates this kind of self-loathing and endless schism, which I think is just not debatable. But that doesn't mean that you're critiquing the persons within the tradition and saying that there's nothing good that happens in it. Also, I would add that I agree because of this is part of like my whole theory beyond technological babble, but I think because Protestantism and Christianity has gone global through the Western consciousness, it is somewhat the water we swim in, and we just assume all the goods parts. That's kind of what you were talking about, Jacob. I agree with that because they're just there. They're everywhere. But the bad parts are unconscious because Jung, because Freud, because we repress them, because we don't want to acknowledge those things. But they're there. It produces all the bad fruit that comes with it, and you don't get the good without the bad. You can't take all the good things and not acknowledge the bad things.
So this goes back to Temple Grandin saying that we need to be like hands-on right from like the time we're like 4 years old. Like get a hammer and a nail and hammer and nail stuff and get practical and actually go and help people. Like that's what I think is, because that's at the end of the day, that's my whole thing is about. It's like what does all this theology have to do with me loving my neighbor?
100%, Chad, because here's the thing. Like if all these people that have post-Lutheran theology to whatever degree that they do weren't constantly promulgating it in an intellectual way and shoving it down people's throat without acknowledging all the bad, I wouldn't have a problem with it. If you're just going to your local kind of parish model church that's post-Luther and loving your neighbor, fine. But if you're promulgating your ideology that has a lot of terrible shit that comes along with that I've seen and experienced, I will fight you to the very end.
First, let me unmute
Luke
myself.
can fight. Don't get in a fight with Luke; you'll lose.
Well, hold on. One thing you said, Luke, is you have to take the good with the bad, and I think that's fundamentally wrong. You can acknowledge the good, acknowledge the bad, and recognize that we can separate the good from the bad.
Well, I think you can, but I just
and you should.
Yes, and you have to acknowledge it, and you should work on the bad, of course. But you can't just you can't just take all. What I'm saying is you can't just be like, well, look at all these good things, and then argue and debate and say that they're and not acknowledge all the bad things. Of course, you should talk about them and work on them.
Yeah, no, I kind of, one of the things I'm putting my finger, at least that I'm starting to see, is we need to recognize that Protestantism was a product of the Enlightenment. And so much of this.
I think you have your cart and horse backwards, but go ahead, Lance.
Right, but that's like the secularization of it, well, as it's unfolded here over the past few hundred years, like the secularization, the materialist reductionist, this too much of a leaning towards the academic and these sorts of things that we see ourselves swimming in today. You know, my Methodist church of my youth has schismed right down the middle. And it's schism. It's a secular schism, right?
Well,
and
okay. The word
lost
secular
ourselves into too much of the. I think the milieu of the West is the milieu of this over rational, over scientism, and it's creeped in the church. I tell you what, if you put out a documentary that you're going to go find Noah's Ark, Christians will flock to it and will want to find it because they want scientific proof for their religion. And I raised my hand because that was me. And this is me not dogging Protestants or evangelicals. Every week I'm going to house church with my boys that I've loved and lived with for the past 15 years. And they're my dudes. And I don't talk to them about orthodoxy at all. I just love and hang out with them. And so this is not a critique of that, but that spirit that is consuming our whole society right now has totally infected. And by the way, it's affected orthodoxy. It's affected Judaism, Jacob. It's affected Catholicism.
That word secular, Father Eric is a secular priest, and people don't understand that. And I think
I
that's
live out in the
problem.
world, not in a monastery.
Yeah. So
So if you want to define it a different way, you know what I meant, though.
Well, no, I know what you meant, and I think the problem is because Protestants, in fact, were opposed to this idea of secular as opposed to holy, right? And this distinction between holy and profane, right? So we call something a profanity and we think it's bad, right? It's like, no, the profane isn't bad. It's just not holy, right? And I think that is one of the main mistakes of Protestant theology that we must get rid of.
The goal with that was to try and make the whole world holy and to try and make the other 6 days of the week look like Sunday. And there's some fruit to that, but there is also a lack of specialness. And I do think that I have noticed this. This is one of the things that I can still kind of tell between Catholics and especially evangelical Protestants is that Catholics treat church as sort of a different special time. And evangelicals really do their best to treat their whole life as church. And to the extent that, church can look like an airport hangar, but there is this idea that you're supposed to be, living your highest all the time, right? And maybe that's unsustainable, but there is a good motivation behind why that was why that idea was being pushed, and I can still see that distinction a little bit, for better and for worse on each side. I feel like there's pros and cons on either side of that one, honestly.
I have to disagree. Chezi always says Shabbat is an island I swim to every week, and it's there. You cannot maintain that level. Like if you're the type of person who can be holy, right? Then maybe you do need to go and be in a monastery.
But one of the temptations of our current modern world is to compartmentalize your faith and to have it not have anything to do with your family or your work or your interactions with your friends or what have you. And that's dangerous too.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you think of the profane as bad, if you can't have any secular priests, right? Then yeah, there's something really horrible about that. But we need our secular priests, and that's why Father Eric should actually talk more.
Okay, I'll try.
Well, this, which is funny, you were talking about, I'm reading Alexander Schmeman's For the Life of the World. And one of the things he talked about is he used that exact same thing where we've separated these two out, and there's no separation between what happens in the liturgy and what happens in the world. And he used that exact words when you said that. So just as Christianity can and must be considered the end of religion, so the Christian liturgy in general and the Eucharist in particular are indeed the end of the cult of the sacred religious act, isolated from and opposed to the quote unquote profane life of the community. The whole idea is that you don't need to have that. Oh, he left. Is there should be there's no separation in it, right? It's bringing everything together. And then he also, which he mentioned here, which is again, I was talking about Jacob, which is Orthodoxy and Judaism, and this is similar in Catholicism too, I bet, which is the goal is to be holy. That's the goal. It's holiness, not goodness or, you know, all these other things you talk about. Like
spoken like a good Methodist.
Yes. Well, but also my charismatic, you get this, Sam, because you're a Unitarian charismatic. My charismatic friends, that's what it is, man. Right?
Holiness, yeah. Holy rollers. I mean, that's the you know, the bad negative nickname, but
we exist everywhere. We're infiltrated most places.
Yeah.
You know.
So what happens when they fall short? How do they treat? Because this is what I run into sometimes in AA. You'll have people who are like really like, you know, like all about the life, and then when they start like kind of falling short and stuff, they can never share the truth with somebody about how shitty they're doing.
It's not moralistic, Chad. It's a daily reprieve,
right?
It's a daily pursuit. You're always going to fall short, and
you go to the priest when you need to go to confession.
And for evangelicals, this is really one of the functional bits of the penal substitutionary atonement, is this really, really strong emphasis on forgiveness, in that there's nothing that you can do to separate yourself from God, right? You know, Jesus has died for you, for your sins. He took the punishment for your sins, so you won't ever be punished for your sins. You are that forgiven. And so when you fall short and you mess up, you don't need to, I don't know, go through some weird kind of instrumentalized process to get back on the good side. You just always are on the good side. And that love is always there. And so you should pick up and keep going even when you fall. That's sort of the functional role of what PSA does for evangelicals.
Now, part of that, there's something about that I understand and believe to be true. But then I've met people who are like suffering and like basically dying, who will not accept a real pragmatic solution to their problem because of that answer. And
exactly.
And they'll come to you and they'll say, well, what do I have to do to get better? And you're like, well, there's this. And they're like, yeah, but I already have God, you know.
I already had my altar call moment. I already did the altar call.
Right.
But here I am. I'm still in the ditch. Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know, man. Suffering that. I don't give a shit. Like,
well, and I think that can be some of the problem. And this is, listen, there are tons. Paul Vanderklay gets this. And there are tons and tons and tons of Protestant pastors that totally get this. There is no magic trick to, oh, I know that now, and then now I'm okay. There's a process that you need to go through. And so you'll hear sometimes, like in Orthodoxy, there might be, you don't take the Eucharist for a period of time, and it's not a punishment. It's like there's this program that you need to, and they put you through like a process and what we would call our steps, right, Chad?
Yeah.
That is a way for you. It's not that you're not unsaved or he doesn't love you, but there are processes that you need to go through, things you need to do that will help you to be well.
Well, at the end of the day, if I'm not honestly, like, if I'm not taking actions, I'm not going to believe what the stuff that's coming out of my mouth, you know? And like, so like, the idea of like faith without works is dead. I really believe that there's a very deep truth to that. Does that mean like if I'm not working that God doesn't love me or whatever? No, but like if I really want to know and embody faith, there is a works about it. So then I don't have to second guess what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Or like second guess my my existence basically, and or God's existence. It's like, but like I don't know how to. I wish I was smarter. All you freaking guys have like seminary and like whatever college shit going on, but like at the end of the day, like I don't understand a lot of things, and I should just stop.
You do.
You do,
Chad,
though.
you have the whole of it. The 12 steps is the whole of the process.
Yeah.
And you can find that, and I find that you can find that in Judaism. Like here we have Jacob trying to go out and he wants to, do his counseling and was thinking about being a rabbi.
Mhm.
I guarantee Jacob, who's the name of the rabbi? Yosef shared it with me. He talks a lot about addiction.
Oh yeah,
Rabbi Tversky?
Joey? Reb Joey?
Oh, right. That guy. I forget his name. Yeah, there's a rabbi who basically he's just an addiction counselor, and he's also a rabbi. Before
But
I
he talks
forget,
about.
I have a question I need to ask
Go ahead.
Father Eric. If somebody comes to confession and you assign them penance, should they not take communion until they've actually done whatever you assign them?
Would depend on the penance. Your average penance is going to be, and maybe we've leaned too far in this direction, but all penances are arbitrary, right?
What does that mean?
It means that Jesus is the one who saves you from your sins. And so your penance isn't actually going to be able to match what he did. So it's not like the satisfaction that you're offering for your sins is what saves you. It's more like your little participation in the big things that God is doing.
yes. That's what the steps are in a lot of ways.
But
Chad, you've got it.
But then,
And so
you take
most of the
communion?
time, your penance is something that could be completed 5 minutes after the completion of your, confession. Say 5 Hail Marys, say 1 decade of the Rosary. I would say if I were to, let's say it's a 3:30 confession and somebody's planning on going to the 4:30 Mass. Every once in a while, if I think that a person on the other side of the screen would benefit from it, I'd be like, hey, how about a cold shower for your penance? So a little harder. I'll always give them a little bit of negotiation room on that, right? Because if they don't think they can do it, or if it's going to be too much for them, I don't want to, tie up heavy burdens and refuse to lift a finger to help them, right? That's a bad thing. But I would say
the beginning part's cold. Like before the hot water heater kicks in, that part can be cold. But I gotta finish hot, or else I'm going to be shivering. And
no, your body will strengthen. So anyway, if they've received absolution, they can receive communion. That's the short answer.
So what are some of what if it's something serious? You don't just tell them 10 Hail Marys, right?
Define what do you think is serious?
Somebody comes and tells you she had an abortion.
Yeah.
That's serious.
Yeah. I would I don't know. You have to there's this mercy is always an extension of things that you don't deserve, right? And that's kind of my fundamental stance in the confessional is you don't deserve to be, you're not getting what you deserve, and praise God for that, right? And so if somebody's really already broken up, if somebody's already really, beaten down by their sins, and I see plenty of that, the shame, the guilt, my job as an agent of mercy is to lift that up. I got to take that burden off of you, reconcile you, and we're gonna start working on, hopefully we're gonna be able to be in a position to start working on, let's say, years of vices that have been built up and all that. But I'm not going to be able to fix that in the 5 minutes or so that I have in the confessional.
Do you know how long someone who had lapsed under persecution was required to go through penance at the Council of Nicaea?
3 years?
7 years.
7 years. 7 years. Yeah. And you know what? That probably was working back then.
Well, I have to say, this is one thing I have noticed, especially in the penitent Baal Tshuva community in Orthodox Judaism, is if you don't give people a manner of actually being like, okay, I'm going to in fact do these difficult things over a long period of time, it feels like cheap grace.
I always suggest a 4th step, a 5th step, a 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th step, and something like the 10th and 11th and 12th step. Really, because like when you like the idea of writing and seeing the truth about myself and then sharing like in a confessional manner, that's probably one of the hardest things that'll happen through the process of being really, really honest, like really honest with another person. And then moving out of that into actually making amends to people. Those are some of the greatest penitence I've ever done. Because if you ask, most people have never done this, right? Most people have never actually made amends for the harms they've done to other people for many reasons, oftentimes thinking that it's undeserving that they do this. Like, I don't need to do that. What about my amends? It's like, no, nothing. You don't deserve an amends, but you must make an amends. And so, like, these different things, it's very interesting that there's some parallels there. But like the steps are a matter of embodiment of I guess I would say probably something like a holy practices and constantly seeking God. But it's all about, because all the things that are locking me up are all these kind of hidden fears within me that are actually blocking me from God. It's not God. Like, God's not lost. I am. And so I'm the one who has all this stuff blocking me, and I'm constantly selling it to myself, and I am buying it. And so the steps are something that, and the service in service to others are things that have completely transformed me. And I'm surprised the church doesn't have more of, especially like, say, the 12-step stuff, where it's like not only practice these principles in all my affairs, but carrying a message to others who are just like me. But like do you, Eric, like suggest making amends and things like this? Are those things that you might suggest?
So, I mean, yes, ultimately. I think regularly scheduled confessions and spiritual direction are two different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so regularly scheduled confessions, it's like we want that to be kind of done in like 3 to 5 minutes, right? It's like we're about business here,
right?
With that particular sacrament. Whereas, so it's like, somebody says, I got in a real big fight with my so-and-so, and I'm like, okay, we should probably make sure to have an apology and a reconciliation there, right? It'll just be a little quick thing. They're already there. They're already confessing their sins. I'm not going to lay things too hard on them, right? Whereas, I do meet a few people regularly, and I can go much more in depth with them because they're making 30-minute to an hour-long appointments every so often, and so it's just a different, the confessional. It's kind of business-like. We're getting the sins forgiven so you can go receive communion.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
I've heard in Orthodoxy they talk about confession is also referred to as reconciliation.
Yep, same thing.
Yep. And that's part of, is that part of your prayer too? In that, so Chad, you know, the 12 steps, the program is talk about, it's meant to help you reconciling yourself to God and to others. Right. And the thing for me is
And
the therapeutic aspect of that, which is you don't need to beat yourself up about needing God's love. This is a totally different thing. Like, and what Jacob said, that cheapened, there is something about, like, I'll tell you, going through the 12 steps is not going to be easy, but it will be the most fruitful thing you will ever do in your life if you really fully go through that. And I think that there are, like, Sam made a comment about 7 years or whatever, but Jess and I had spent some time reading this book called The Ethics of Beauty. And they realized when soldiers went off to war that they needed some time to heal, spiritually heal, because the act of war is awful. And so there was like, it's a 2 or 3 year period where they wouldn't, take Eucharist, but they had this very specific thing where they would bring them into the community, right? And they would start loving them, and they would start giving them a chance to process and come back. It was not a punishment. It was, they saw something, that they were doing things in a certain way that was very therapeutic, and a process that ultimately brought people back to fullness. So
I don't mean to interrupt this, but Father Eric, are you going to be here for a while?
Another 20 minutes.
Okay, because I'm getting kind of tired, and I was hoping you might kind of take over for me.
Yeah, I'm going to actually roll out, but I want to say before I leave, thank you, Jacob, for talking with me today. And I do appreciate you. And my apologies for calling you an a-hole.
You're one of my favorites. Don't worry about it.
And God bless you. And thanks for talking with me, Eric. And always great to see you, Lance. And you as other two. Bye-bye.
See ya.
I wish I had made Garth an admin, but I haven't yet.
No, don't even. It's.
But I'm gonna go listen from the background and like possibly do a short nap. You guys have fun.
Okay.
Okay.
Lance, I hear you talking about all that AA stuff and the steps and all of that, and I think right now the Catholic Church is in a lot of ways kind of falling apart, and it kind of needs to, because just things aren't working the way they're supposed to. And when you've got things that aren't working, oftentimes the only way to put them back together is to break them down first. So, but the thing is we've just got all this momentum and all these people, and it's just going to keep on going forward until whatever happens. So,
well, Pope Benedict had talked about, and I really don't like how he's being so disparaged right now. It seems
he's
like
not being disparaged by me.
Right. Well, and he talked about, and he was talking about this in the 60s and the 70s, that he sees the church is going to, in the moment we find ourselves in, is going to be winnowed down to a very small group of people. And it's going to be difficult for a long time. But that small group of faithful, holy people are then going to be the light when this thing finally comes to their senses. And he saw we're not going to be this big, massive church, and the institutional stuff was going to need to fall away. And I didn't realize the depth of his theological. I just spent some time reading about him, and I was seeing who he was associating himself with, like Hans van Balthasar and some others, and then some other theologians I had heard about. Boy, he was a powerhouse, and really a loving the
characterization of him as the Panzer Cardinal or God's Rottweiler is just.
Well, I found out why, because he was speaking against that kind of movement we see out there now. So of course, mainstream, they've got to hate someone who opposes some of the forces we see.
But he wasn't like, the Grand Inquisitor just smashing people with a hammer, even though there'd be plenty of Catholics who'd want to see that. But he was exceedingly fair as long as he could manage to be. And I don't think he liked the leadership positions he was continually forced into. He would have much rather stayed in the university. So. Yeah,
but don't you see that down at the parish level? I mean, it happens in Protestant world or whatever, you have in your congregation lay people who have the gifts and the time and the love. When you find someone who's truly in crisis, it's both yourself, but then you also have people within the church that come around people to help people through these difficult times. And if they need that, I mean, we kind of lean on each other for those, to walk us through those things, to get us to those places. I'm sure that's the same for you, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, this is the funny thing about a lot of Catholic parishes, right? Is it's like you've got a church inside of the main church. And what that is it's your folks who are showing up throughout the week, right? And then you've got like the big body of people that come only on Sundays. You've got like the daily mass crowd that might be 30 to 50 people, but then you're getting up to like 1,200 people the various masses throughout the weekend, or even more than that. I haven't looked at the numbers recently. And that thing that Sam Adams was talking about earlier with people not connecting what they're doing on Sunday with the rest of their lives is like kind of a big problem. It's like, you're just going in, you're putting the coin in the slot, pulling it on Sunday mornings, and that takes care of things. And it's so complicated because I think having room in the back where people aren't there, I think there's some utility to that, but we're just losing a lot of folks.
Go talk to an evangelical megachurch pastor, and what he will tell you is, I've got thousands of people coming through my doors, and they're changing seats, but none of them, but they're not moving into discipleship. Like they're not moving into it. And so their biggest heart is, how do I get people in the game? How do I get them to do the things?
Yeah. And that's always, that's the perennial problem. You're never going to solve that perfectly.
Thanks, Jonathan, Sandy.
Hey, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you've got your question ready, go for it.
Oh, I was like this to me, because I had thought about this like years ago, and I have seen the same pattern that Father Eric is talking about. And I'm like, this is almost like spiritual natural selection is what it is in some way. And it's like the mindset, it's like, it's tradition for tradition's sake, right? It's like, you're just doing it that's how they can like go into church, sit down, go through the service, and then walk out and then have their normal lives, right? It's like, well, I'm just doing my tradition and that's what I do. Which in some ways that's kind of what it is supposed to do. Some ways, right? You are supposed to have that tradition, but for something more, right? And that something more is getting lost. Is that a fair way to describe it?
What something more are you alluding to?
Holiness.
Yes. Yeah.
Example, right. Garth, of what you're thinking of. Well, holiness is a word, but what are you thinking of? What do you see when you say that?
So
like more or the holiness.
It's kind of like let's say you walk into a church, right, and you go through the sermon, right, and you kind of you embed yourself in this, right, because this is like your culture. It's like this is how you see to like function, right, in the world, to integrate, because as people we just have to integrate to a certain degree, right? And so you're integrated into this culture, but you don't still have those like how would I call it? This is probably not the right word, but those high reasons for why you're doing that in the first place, right? You're not going that extra level deeper, It's just like it's kind of like what was talked about earlier. It's like, it works and it does work, but you don't know why it works, right? But you still do it. But the problem is that if you don't know how exactly it works, then it can't get passed down. It can't get communicated. You just keep doing it.
It sounds like you're talking back on Chad's point of the 12 steps. If you have something you do that will follow you out the door, that will help you through the week to follow what it is you believe that God is calling you to, then you're going to grow, then you're going to act, then you're going to become more like you want to become. but that's not a mystery in some respects. In some ways it is, but in other ways it's simply doing the walk.
Okay.
And that's the thing that, like, I mean, I was dropping in the chat quite seriously. You look at some of the things where people, I was really interested in the dynamic of the different religious perspectives that were represented here in the early part of the conversation. And when you look at how everybody is going to apply all of these truths into how they walk it out from their religious perspectives. And yet we're all saying, even like Father Eric's saying, is like there's a massive thing happening in churches. My ex wouldn't have a good thing to say about the Pope. Yeah, I think about this a lot. I'm 6 years out of a difficult marriage. It took me 36 years to decide to do it.
Oh, wow.
Lost both kids to the church along the way, maybe, although I did have my one that's disabled to come up over Christmas, and he sat and prayed, but it was a very interesting Jacob kind of prayer. Kind of all about the fact I was eating healthy food and therefore was not going to die soon on him, and all those kind of things, which I'm not sure quite qualifies as your typical Sunday dinner prayer. But at the same time, he's the one that's kind of sticking with stuff. Whereas my one that's like the reason that Chad stepped away, the justice seeker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I'm lucky, I get to have good conversations with him. But there's a point at which they both don't yet forgive me for making them maintain contact with their dad, which I figured was the right thing to do through 36 years plus of, hey, boys need a father. Because I'm watching the earlier dynamic. It's a very really well-stated male headspace. I mean, my best friends are boys. I married a guy who had 9 boys, and there was 9 kids in his family. I used to get asked if his mother was still alive when I'd tell people how many in-laws I now had. There's a way of thinking that Jacob was getting at earlier with some of the legal conversation. There's a lot of lawyer there's a lot of lawyer take on things. And that's part of the problem in some ways that I see it, because I mean, I look at some of the stuff from my perspective. I'm Anglican background, married into a Calvinist church. Well, no, I married a guy from a Calvinist church who had nothing good to say about it, and then inadvertently dragged him back through one of the women's groups when we moved to where we were living. Not sure I'm still forgiven about that. But that particular church, for all of his complaints about it, that's the one we both say is we missed that one. It was a lot of blue collar farmers and carpentry, and they're all the guys that weren't, and now like we're talking about some of the stuff going on in the Calvinist side. That's all in that same headspace, all the educated people that are standing back and arguing about how they're going to make everybody shape up and therefore save the world. And I'm like, no. I mean, I used to argue with this one guy from our church, who's now one of their preaching elders, who is like, I'm too stupid to be an elder. Like, I can't even do math in school. And I mean, they ran a big business. I think there's probably a reason, Jake, that Jesus picked fishermen. I mean, seriously, I was saying to Chad, sometimes you just need to hear English. Just simply hear English. And we don't always get there. And I was wanting to ask, in that terms of some of the, when the penal substitutionary atonement came up, and then when Jacob was talking about cheap grace is a big deal. You can lose people over cheap grace. It's been 7 years. Well, it's been a long time, longer than it feels since I left my ex, and just starting to kind of get him talking about stuff. And I don't mean the marriage, I mean just life and church and stuff, you know, and our kids, you know. Sometimes the miracles we're looking for is being able to do what Chad was challenging Father Eric about, is what exactly do you say to somebody with a hard question that steps into the confessional? Because no matter how much the other guys say we're a confessional church, and I looked it up, have been since the 1500s, probably earlier, but they weren't counting. This is not a new problem. This is not in any respect a new problem. Me being a woman, a wife, a mother, whatever the heck I was, you live it every day because it comes home to you. And the only sensible thing I could do to save us all was break it apart, which is what Father Eric's saying is happening to the Catholic Church right now. That is a terrifying place, but good for you for knowing that. It really sometimes does come down to that. And because it gives people space to get their head together about it. It gives them space to step back and see the problem from that point of perspective. You know, I think sometimes I think to myself, if I'd have been brave and done this in my marriage in the first 5 years, even pre-marriage, like I tried to, but except I got bullied in by my mom for, you know, there's stupidity in all of us. We are people. We do things we should not do on a daily basis, and we don't notice. Every one of you guys, if I ask you, would probably see this from a different perspective. But what the solutions that I'm watching people come to, aside from what Father Eric just said, of letting it break apart, are not going to solve it. I've been watching the discussions in some of the chats. Oh, you know, well, how we're going to legalize this and legalize that. And I'm thinking, I spent my entire life in church listening to them, A, complain that the church has their nose in our business, and B, won't listen to them when we tell them how we want it to be, what we want them to do, and how they're going to help us do it. And I'm like, well, which do you want? You know, because we want both. We want everything. We want the world. We don't get to have it. But I do believe strongly in grace. I do believe in forgiveness. I said in the chat, I asked for 20 years the definition from a number of pastor friends. What is forgiveness? Tell me, what is forgiveness? And I had a fabulous apology from one of them for their solution to my family problem of making my husband an elder, thinking it would help him to get his act together. Strongly to anybody considering that, don't do it. Very unhealthy. We had a chat about that the other week, and he's like, that was so not helpful to him. Don't do it. You know? And Lance, you were talking about mega churches. When I was listening to some of the stuff from my current denomination, except I'm not a member because I'm in a house church. It's a church plant. So it's a different setup. Everybody's on the hot button topics, but the thing is that one of the other topics was mega churches, because the people that were working on some of the power use and misuse of power committees and the abuse committees were talking about reading a book, Church Called Tove, which was all about some of the issues going on in some of the churches at the moment with stuff. And like, I loved that book. I wish there was a set solution to everybody's problem, because like, I don't think I could ask people to, if I was a pastor having to sit where you are, Father Eric, and tell people how to walk forward, I couldn't tell them to do some of the things I did or chose to do. Like I couldn't have. It wasn't all safe. It wasn't all smart. It might be the holy Christian thing to do, but I got told that in rather unpleasant contexts when I would do it. Not everybody has to have the same answer. And I think that's one of the hardest things we're going to have to deal with, is the fact that not everybody's answer is the same. And like Chad was talking about steps, we all do the steps at a different pace. My dad was alcoholic. My mom wouldn't let us go to those things. My sister and I talked about that. There's a ton of really, really good things we could have learned in that process. Problem solving, problem is probably as much as them sending people off to law school to learn how to think like Plato. But, anyway, there's a question in there somewhere. I just couldn't find it, which is why I said to Garth go first, because he had a real question.
Oh, no. I mean, I thought that was really good. I remember you mentioned at one point how, what was it? It was something about how like things need to be broken down first to like, make you stronger. That's why I kind of left the comment earlier, how it's like, I enjoy listening to you rail on Paul of Tarsus because it makes me want to learn more about Paul. Right. It's like that legit, like is one of the biggest motivators for me. Cause it's like, I've got Jacob here who's saying this about Paul. Jacob just pinged me. Sorry. But he's saying this about Paul, right? And it's like, do I have anything to say otherwise? It's like, well, I have a couple things, and it's like, and so it's I get to be able to sift through that, right? Simply because of that. So that was like the big thing that popped in my head when you were when you were giving your talk there. So
and I think it all boils down to I was raised Methodist, then I did the mega church, a smallish mega church for a little bit. Then I went to seminary and was a house church planter. And now I found my way into Orthodoxy. And I went to a Catholic college. So I've been kind of exposed to a lot of things. I think one of the things I can see in all of it, and you can certainly correct me, Father Eric, is really it's introducing people into a way of life, a way of living. Like Jesus is not an idea, he was a person. Or if you would even go back you look at Judaism, I mean, God is a real, interactive thing and a real caring father, right? And so, so when we talk about way of living, if you look at 12-step life, or as you bring that into the church, and I've seen whether it be successful, and I think it doesn't matter what denomination or whatever you're at, is bringing people into a community and helping them live a daily design for living, because every day has enough troubles and it's so hard to get off and so do you have something that doesn't have all the answers for everyone, but do you have a way of living? And some of that might be with your hurts and your stuff, because it's suffering and all these things that people are coming to. Do you have people that can walk them through and give them practical things like on a daily basis, that if you do these things and you live this way, the transformation, the reconciliation, the healing, like those things happen. And I think, and I've seen this in all those forms I talked about. I've been very fortunate that I had people that cared about me in all those places, and there were relationships and loving, in my instance, Christian men who would mentor me and I would look up to, and they would help me walk it. And they would give me practical tools to live the life. And because ultimately it's to be transformed, and it's messy. It's just messy. We're messy. But, so for me, that's what I've tried to do at church. I think when churches, and I think I've seen it in Reformed churches, I've seen it across churches that get that aspect of it, and they really come around and help people live life with one another and introduce them into a way of living. That to me seems to be what works.
Yeah. And, the mystery behind it all is whether or not somebody's going to choose to engage in the fight. Somebody's going to choose to do that grappling with God, contention, or if they're going to continue to engage in destructive and deceptive behavior with themselves. And it's like, that's the mystery of it all right there. What are you going to go out and run the steps? The 12 steps are there. The groups are all over the place. Are you gonna do it, or are you just gonna continue to run away from it? And it's, ooh. Yeah.
Some people find God on the mountaintop of joy, but most people find him in the pit of best desperation.
Yeah, but how desperate
It doesn't.
How
have to be
desperate does
big.
it have to get? Because like somebody could get a bad grade on a test in 8th grade, and that's their turnaround moment. And other people got to go all the way down, and they might not stop.
It was the same for me with like Peterson and how he kind of flipped up my life in some ways, right? It was like I wasn't completely desperate, but I was definitely in a situation where I was more desperate than I previously was. That kind of had that big shift. So yeah, I've experienced it, not all the way to the bottom of the pit, but just like maybe hanging off the edge of the pit or something like that.
Yeah.
I like this T-shirt. This guy said in a rehab center, he had this 5-foot gal that drove him up to this rehab center, and he was fighting her the whole way, trying to hit the wheel and stuff. And somehow she got him there. She brought him back a T-shirt the next day that yesterday I hit bottom, and today I started digging. You know, some people will hit bottom, will keep digging.
Yeah, and it's something else is just what has already been said before is the atomization of society. How it's so easy for you to do your own thing, and when you have that option, how do you convince those people that engaging with the community is actually worth it? Because in their own mindset, they're like completely self-sustaining. And so it's like
that's the whole
you turn their
spiritual, not
electricity
religious.
off.
And you hear that within Christian,
you turn
you hear
their
that within Christian
electricity off.
communities too, and that's just an excuse to not go to church. But that is a product of a highly individualized Christianity, and that's not the case. Trust me, I'm not trying. This is not dogging Protestants, because there's tons of people who see the value of community and commit their lives to it. I'm not saying that.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think the Protestants are doing it better, even if their theology doesn't support it.
You know, but I think something that's been around in the West is this sense of like, well, I don't need. So, for example, I don't need a priest for confession. I don't need to do these rituals or these traditions because that's outdated. It's just me.
But
and
if I
Jesus.
miss my Bible study, oh, I'm in trouble.
Oh gosh, darn it! Because I know, because like this
Sorry,
one's like
I keep interrupting you, Lance.
No, you're fine. Because I know this one's really deep in America. That America has always had this thing of like being self-sustaining.
Rugged
right?
individualism. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's like I know tons of people who like, you know, it like embody that attitude. Right. And that's like the same attitude for they're like, I don't see why I have to go to church. Right. I have a job. I have a family. You know, I can get food. I can do everything. And it's like, and they just literally don't see any problem with it.
Well, that's what Sandy talked about. I will tell you one of the things, if you are independently wealthy in a white collar job, you can become highly siloed versus, for example, if you grew up in a farming community, this still happens in the community I grew up in. If someone passes away, people will stop the harvesting of their own field. They'll take all their equipment, harvest the field, put the grain up, so then they don't have to worry about it. And you might need to rely on your neighbors. And in smaller communities, like even if you disagree politically, like you have to rely on each other, and you do. And I think in blue collar work, there's a lot more teamwork in. And then also if
okay, so I was going to mention the people I was actually thinking of were blue collar people, because it's like I don't know what it is. It's like because it's like they'll think of a scenario like you were just saying. It's like, well, what if this happens? And they're like, oh, don't worry, I got that covered, right? It's like they think they've got all their bases covered.
You don't.
The other thing, you know what the gift of financial stress is, and it's a gift. Because when I went to go, by the way, when you go become a house church pastor, you don't make a lot of money, Father Eric. And I left an executive legal career to do that. There were some months where I didn't know how we were going to pay rent or the kids were going to eat.
Yeah.
And always something was provided. There was this thing here, but what it also does is it gives you a sense of dependence on community and others, and on God. I mean, lots of other things. And you realize you need more help than just, you know, when I was making a big paycheck, I didn't need anybody because I could cover any of my problems and money would solve it. I could buy it or do it or whatever. There was a gift in really, really struggling financially. The stress of that is insane. But as I look back, boy, did it help me.
Frankly, it probably just took the blinders off. Because I don't know. It's like I look at the way we've built our society, where if you take away the oil and the electricity, nothing will work. Nothing will work. Everything will just come smashing down.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh gosh, we're one gigantic solar flare away from hell on earth.
That's like what happened in Texas, where they got snow for 3 days, and their power grid was just scrambled. Because
It's all that delicate and
It
just
really is. I have a friend who works in hydroelectricity and was talking about I forget which year it was, back in the 90s maybe, and the grid went down all across southern Ontario and into Michigan. And you know what it was? One person missed their cue by like a second or something. You have to be watching constantly. That's all it takes, you know?
And
What I
so
find funny is
your
moving to
financial
this
stress
world
just
now.
revealed that to you.
Here we go. What I think is funny is we're moving to this world now where they're convincing us that to be highly technology, like everything, we're becoming move to cities and high technology, so everything's plugged in and everything else. We're moving ourselves so close to an extinction event because we can't like literally feed ourselves, get ourselves our own water, and take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we're moving to this situation where one little thing gets out of kilter and we are in a bad way.
I explain that to people every day. And apologies to the ministers in the crowd, but I work every single weekend. I belong to a house church. I go when I can. We talk to each other and pray for each other via Facebook Messenger on a regular daily basis. The theory is you don't go to church, you are church, you know? And so we're church to each other. It's, you know, I also would tell people that my job was my church for those years that I was avoiding it because, yeah, people are funny, especially women. You tell them that you're divorced, and the first thing they do is tell you to go to church, their church particularly, and you can meet nice guys. And I'm like, were you listening to me? Taking a break from church. But anywho, the last 2 years, because I'm in retail, I've worked nonstop listening to everybody talk about how, oh, we're all stuck at home. We're all this, we're all that, because we have this story of we are all, as if there's this congealed mass of similarity in every person that really doesn't exist. And that old adage of, but where does the milk really come from? Translates into the tech world too, of all the people going, I don't understand why you don't have this and that size diaper in the brand that I want because my kid can't take this. And how come you're out of nylons? I have a wedding this weekend. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting question. But the truckers were asking me that in the summer. Have you had people complaining yet? Because we don't realize how very interconnected we have made our entire world. Our entire world depends on each other. Every one of us, something's going one way, something's going another way. There's no us and them. There's the only congealed thing is the fact that there's a great big us out there. And so when we start to complain about not having nylons or not having your favorite brand of whatever, it's probably because it's lost in transit somewhere. And or they I'd say to them, but they restructured things so much to keep things running the last 2 years that I said I was listening to nurses at the beginning who had been through SARS. I don't know if you guys had SARS in the States, but in Canada we had SARS back in whenever. And I had 3 nurses go through the cache saying, oh, this is going to be 2 years. You watch, this is going to be a good 2 years. We remember SARS. That stuff like this just doesn't. Nobody realizes the repercussions and the ripple effect this is going to have. And I'm like, okay, so I thought I'm going to tell myself this is a good 2-year process. And if we're done early, woohoo, bonus, you know? So I kept calm. Same thing the truckers are telling me now. So I'm saying that to people is, you know what, stay calm with your life. Life is that I impact you. You guys could live like 20 hours away from me, but somehow or another, something I do, whether I stood on here or not, could impact you, because it all has a trickle down effect. Because really and truly, even if I don't know, Father Eric, sometimes I think even if it's just the little miracles we don't understand, I've talked a lot about synchronicity in weird timings of things in my life that have happened. And I tend to believe in hanging in there for the good that's going to come out of stuff, which is why I stayed far too long and put, yeah, it wasn't all my fault for staying. My ex really didn't want the embarrassment of being divorced, either. Neither of us did, because there is. But you can do things in a right timing. You can do things in a weird timing. I've always believed in doing well by the best that I can do, even when I screw up. I still believe it. And I believe in holding out for things. I said my son was praying for the meal that we had. It was an interesting autistic prayer. The funny thing is he's also deaf. It took me 30 years to get language in him, to the point that the hearing principal at the deaf school wanted to dump him out into the regular public board, because they said he's not signing, therefore he's not benefiting from it. And the deaf principal said, I don't know why you're putting so much effort into this. I was paying for lessons and this and that. There's a few people like my son who have autism on one of the boards that talk about it occasionally. They see patterns differently. All three of my guys have stuff going on. My ex-husband and both sons. Patterns have to be solved by the person that's processing them. Sorry, I've gone on a tangent again in a sense, but it comes back down to, if a person cannot see the connection between something, they're not going to benefit from it until they see the connection. Whether it's where does my milk come from, or Jacob praying for, the food that I'm eating. And blowing me away talking about tech, Lance. He says, I like tech. He was saying to me something about, the lady in the restaurant came with a little handheld thing that has the words going across so you can see and choose your meal, instead of just telling her and writing it on a piece of paper. She was interested in the fact that Jacob's deaf and I'm signing. And I said to her, hey, that's really good for people that are going deaf and hard of hearing from age too. She goes, oh yeah, I think this thing's brilliant. And Jacob says, yeah. And like McDonald's did that first and he spelled something quick. And I said to him, what did you just spell? And he goes, Kiosk. And I went, kiosk? Where did you learn the word kiosk? And this is a kid who had next to no language for the longest time. It would go in and in and in. I think we need to have hope for this world, even at the point where it looks like it might be kinder to have an asteroid take us out some days. But honestly, I think we need to have hope for it. I really do. Because we're all a mess. It's not any one person. We're all a mess. We're all screwed up. And for all of the stupid stuff I've gone through and talk about from time to time, I still think it's worth it. Have hope. Laugh at each other.
And this is why I shop at...
Go ahead, Garth.
This is why I shop at farmers markets. And I actually... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, that connection you were talking about, that is the reason why I do like to shop at farmers markets and milk. Because I will walk into like a grocery store, and it's like a lot of the stuff there, it's like I kind of understand what all that is, right? And it's like, and it's definitely not like the real chicken or like the real, horseradish sauce, right? Or anything like that, right? It's like if you go to a farmer, they'll tell you how it grows, right? Because they know every in and out of it, right? So if the grocery stores, if they go collapse because all the food companies collapse for whatever reason, it's like, well, it's a good thing I've got a farmer that I know who is able to grow food and I can survive off that.
The next step is getting your own garden.
That's right. Yes. And I will get as big a garden as I can have in a townhome. So.
All right. So it's been delightful. But I believe I'm the last mod of the stream. And so unless Jacob jumps back here pretty quickly. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to end it.
All right. No, that's
Please
fine.
do.
I gotta go do stuff anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Peace
I have
out.
All right. Take care.
fun. Thanks for listening. Bye, guys.
God bless you all.